My name is Arthur Hale. I am 69 years old, and I am the keeper of a vow one carved in blood and tears to my late wife, Eliza Hale. She passed away on a misty autumn morning when the apple trees outside our porch still held the breath of night. I held her cooling hand and made a promise: I will protect our orchard with my life. For 41 years, I have lived by that promise. Every crack on the bark, every scratch on the apples, every scent of wet soil after rain carries the memories of love and loss. The old apple trees, rough and weathered, are like Eliza's hands that once held mine, trembling, yet tender. I once believed our only daughter, Eliza Hale, understood that, but her husband, Damien Cross, did not. In his eyes, the orchard was only numbers, commodities, and profit. In mine, it was the soul of my entire life. That night, at their wedding, among soft music and golden lights reflected on sparkling champagne glasses, Damien raised his glass and said, with a rehearsed, hollow smile, "Father, it's time to pass the torch. Hand over the keys. We'll take care of the rest." The room fell silent. Over 100 guests turned to look at me. I stood there, a father turned into an outdated relic in the celebration of a false future. And when I shook my head, he slapped me. It wasn't just a slap. It was the sound of 40 years of pride and silence shattering. The music stopped. Someone coughed softly. A few bowed their heads. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. Lila stood there, her face pale. Her eyes no longer held love or anger, only fear. Fear of him, fear of the truth, fear of having to choose between her husband and her father. I looked at her and understood. The little girl who once ran through the orchard calling me Mom's hero was now standing still, watching that man humiliate me. I didn't shout. I didn't fight back. I simply straightened my collar, wiped the wine from my sleeve, and walked away between 2 rows of strangers' faces. The ballroom doors closed behind me, heavy as the burial of an era. Outside, it began to rain. Each drop was as cold as the last shred of respect I still had for him being washed away. When I returned home, I went into my study. The warm light fell on a wooden apple box lying quietly beneath the desk, something I hadn't opened since the day Eliza died. I pulled it out. The scent of old wood mixed with memories. Inside was a key, a USB drive, and a small piece of paper with a phone number written in Eliza's trembling yet determined handwriting. I could hear her voice in my head. "If the worst ever happens to the family, call this number." My hands trembled as I dialed the digits. Each tone on the line sounded like a countdown to fate. Then a calm, deep male voice answered, precise, composed, as though he had been waiting for this call for years. "You must be Arthur Hale. Eliza told me this day would come." I didn't know then that this phone call would set off a chain of events that would make all of us pay a price. That night, as I looked out into the orchard drowned in rain, I didn't feel anger. I only felt cold, a cold not from the wind, but from the hollow space Eliza left in my heart. 41 years tending to the orchard, and only seconds to be deemed worthless. If the orchard had a soul, that night, surely, it was weeping with me. Before I continue this story, remember sometimes, to keep a promise, you must lose everything else. And if you've ever had to protect something precious from greed, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is only just beginning. The night before the wedding, everyone thought I was just a senile old man and that he was the bright future of our family. But only I knew behind every smile of Damien Cross was a blade wrapped in velvet. The air of the dinner party was thick with the scent of wine and calculation. The restaurant, located by Lake Lure, gleamed like a massive jewelry box. Golden lights shimmered on the water's surface, like coins tossed into a wishing well, except no one here wished for anything pure. Inside, laughter mingled with the clinking of silverware. From the outside looking in, we looked like the perfect family. Eliza Hale, my daughter, was radiant, her eyes glowing with love for the man beside her. But I knew better. Damien Cross was not a son-in-law. He was a salesman. And what he was trying to sell me was his own future paid for by burying the past of me and Eliza Hale. Damien didn't talk. He performed. Every word, every smile was measured with precision. He poured wine for everyone, twirling the glass so the light refracted like a dance of gold. People laughed, not because he was charming, but because they wanted to side with the man who had money. He looked at me, half friendly, half condescending. Then his eyes slid down to my hands, still marked with soil, and he gave a faint smile, one that said, "You're just a laborer in your own life." He thought the dirt under my nails was proof of poverty, but it was the mark of those who plant with their souls. Damien began rambling about investments, about asset diversification, and luxury resort trends. Those words felt painfully out of place in the fresh air of Asheville, where every season's breeze carried the sweet scent of apples and the memory of Eliza. Then he leaned toward me, lowering his voice as if revealing a golden secret. "Arthur, you know, with a location like this by the lake, Hearthwind Orchard could easily become a multi-million-dollar resort. We're sitting on a real legacy here." The guests around the table murmured in admiration. They heard the word legacy and thought of something eternal, but to me it sounded like an insult. Eliza once called that orchard our second child. He, on the other hand, saw it as an underperforming asset. I wanted to laugh, but my throat closed up. Perhaps for the first time, I understood Eliza when she said, "Not everyone who talks about the future wants it to be good." Damien continued. "You know, Arthur," he sneered lightly, "these days, no one lives off apples and memories anymore. The world pays for vision, not nostalgia." I didn't respond. I stared at the wine in my glass, its deep red, as dark as blood, the color of everything about to be lost. Lila tried to keep the peace, placing her hand over his. "Come on, honey, let's just enjoy tonight," she said softly, but her voice carried fear, not affection. She looked at him the way someone looks at stage lights, blinded by the glow she mistook for love. I sat silently, my hand still holding the half-full glass. I didn't look at Damien. I looked into Lila's eyes, searching for any trace of Eliza left in them. But all I found was emptiness. Damien kept talking about pools and spa facilities, while in my mind, all I could hear was Eliza's laughter echoing through the mud, her face smeared with dirt more beautiful than any luxury resort he could ever imagine. In his eyes, I saw no passion, only calculation, and every time he emphasized the word profit, his hand tightened around his glass as if he were strangling the very land itself. A knife fell to the floor with a sharp, metallic clang. Someone laughed nervously, but the silence that followed was heavier than fear. In that moment, I realized my daughter had chosen his side, and that hurt more than any slap ever could. I remembered Eliza once told me, "Never sell your soul, even if they offer you barrels of gold." That night, I finally understood what she meant. No one in that room knew that amid the toasts and the clinking glasses, the first spark of tragedy had already been lit. And as I looked out over Lake Lure, the shimmering lights seemed to flicker, and I knew Eliza was still watching. She would never let him touch what belonged to us. Late at night, the party had ended, but Damien's words still clung to my mind on the drive home like the lingering taste of wine on my lips. The house lay in darkness. The air was thick. I felt suffocated inside the same home that once overflowed with Eliza's laughter. Unable to bear it, I threw on my old sweater, opened the door, and stepped outside. The scent of the earth drifted on the night breeze, rich and painful like memory itself. The moon hung high, shining with cruel brightness, revealing every scar on the land that Eliza and I had tended for 4 decades. The rows of dark apple trees stood motionless in the gentle wind, like spirits guarding a secret. The insects hummed softly around me, like whispers from the soil. Everything that once lived remembers. I walked to the oldest tree, its trunk gnarled, covered in moss, bent like a mother's hand bracing against the cold. I placed my hand upon it, feeling the rough wood against my skin, trembling as if Eliza were standing somewhere near, watching me. 32 years ago, we carved our initials into its bark. The knife Eliza used still rests in the drawer. I can still feel her hand in mine that day, and hear her bright, clear laughter. A cold wind swept through, and for a moment I thought I felt her hand on my shoulder, whispering, "I'm still here." Eliza once said, "Arthur, there will come a day when our land will be claimed by someone who doesn't know how to bow. When that day comes, fight." Back then, I only laughed, thinking she was worrying too much. But now, her voice echoed in my mind like a prophecy. The scent of damp soil, decaying wood, and ripened apples intertwined the fragrance of time itself, of vows that never fade. If any spirit still wandered these apple hills, I believed it was Eliza, still guarding each tree from the greed of the living. I lifted my gaze to the sky. The moonlight reflected on the old wedding photo hanging by the window, shimmering over Eliza's face like a reminder. "This land is our soul, Arthur," she once said. "It will take care of our family, but only if we take care of it. Never let anyone turn it into a number on a balance sheet." Her words echoed in my head, cutting through the night, clear, decisive, and true. Then I suddenly remembered the wooden apple box she had left behind, the one thing I had never dared to open, resting under the desk like a locked heart. The smooth applewood surface still carried the faint scent of sap she once loved. "Only open it when it's truly necessary," she had warned, her eyes serious. "When a man shows you his true nature, believe him the first time." I trembled at the memory. That night, I felt as though the box itself was waiting for me to open it, as if Eliza already knew what was coming. I bowed my head, placed my hand on the earth, and whispered, "I'll keep my promise, Eliza, even if it costs me everything." The next morning was eerily calm, as if the sky itself was trying to hide something. Sunlight pierced through the thin curtains, blinding and harsh, as though it wanted to erase every trace of the past. It wasn't the light of a beginning, but of an ending. I stood before the mirror in my small room, fumbling with a stubborn tie that refused to stay straight. The tighter it grew, the tighter my chest felt. Eliza used to joke, "Every disaster starts with someone trying to look perfect." This morning, that line sounded like an omen. A knock echoed 3 heavy, short, decisive taps. Not an invitation, a warning. Damien stepped in, the scent of expensive cologne drowning out the old wood of the room. His suit was flawless, his smile polished, but his eyes were cold as steel. In his hand was not a gift, but a bullet wrapped in leather, a thick folder, its paper edges sharp enough to cut skin with a single flip. The door closed behind him. The click sounded like a verdict, sealing me inside a courtroom without a lawyer. "I came to collect the only wedding gift you can still give your approval," he said, his voice low and hurried, like a man who had already tasted blood. He placed the folder on the desk and opened it with a rehearsed gesture. On the title page, bold black ink struck me like a blow to the chest. Cross Ridge Luxury Resort at Lake Lure. And beneath it, his name, where Eliza's once was. Blueprints spread across the table. Glass and steel towers nearly touching the clouds. A poolside bar built where my vegetable patch was. The apple trees uprooted to make way for walking paths. The oak tree where Eliza used to paint was now marked VIP parking. The glass facade reflected sunlight. It looked like a transparent coffin for the soul of our past. "It's just a transfer of management," he said smoothly, sliding a pen and a signature page toward me. "We're forming an LLC. Legally, it's the smartest move, avoiding estate taxes, maximizing family profit, for Lila." Every time he said Lila's name, the corner of his mouth twitched, not out of love, but because he knew it would hurt me. "You want to do what's best for Lila, don't you?" he murmured, his tone syrupy but sharp as a blade. "I'm just helping you be a good father." I didn't look at the papers. I looked straight at him, at the naked greed in his eyes, unmasked and hungry. He mistook my silence for hesitation, a crack he thought he could slip through. "Listen, Arthur," he lowered his voice, smooth and cutting. "You don't have time to romanticize the land anymore. This farm is too much for you now. This is how you secure your daughter's future. It's what she deserves." The air in the room grew heavy. I set my calloused hands on the table. The cracks on my skin reminded me blood and soil are never things to be bargained. I glanced at one of the renderings, a playground stretching over the patch of grass where Eliza once Saturday. In my mind, her laughter blended with the clicking pens of contractors, a requiem in disguise. "You'll still be here, Arthur," Damien said evenly. "Just, your name will be on a plaque, not a payroll. I gently pushed the folder back toward him. No shouting, no trembling. I just looked into his eyes and killed his dream with 2 words. No, Damien. In our Damien sire. His smile vanished for a fraction of a second, a fleeting moment of truth, when the polished gentleman peeled back to reveal the predator beneath. The charm fell from his face as fast as a cheap mask, leaving behind what Eliza once called the eyes of a debt collector. But he recovered almost instantly. The smile returned thin and cold, like the cut of a wineglass edge. After the ceremony, he said quietly, you'll understand that everything I want, I get, even if it means erasing your name from this land. He turned on his heel. The door slammed shut. The papers on the desk trembled, and the smell of his cologne lingered heavy as deceit. I sat in silence, staring out the window. In the distance, Lake Lure was eerily still. That water would soon bear witness to a betrayal. I understood it clearly then. From this moment on, there was no family. Only 2 sides, the seller and the keeper. Today's wedding was not a union. It was the spark that would ignite a war between the past and ambition. Damien had declared war, and I, armed with a promise carved in blood and tears, was ready to fight. The wedding reception was so lavish it felt deceitful, like a glossy coat of paint masking rot beneath. The crystal chandeliers didn't just shine. They cast needles of light onto the crowd, pinning every face into its assigned seat. The scent of roses mixed with the smell of wine, the fragrance of both a wedding and a robbery taking place at once. The background music swelled, signaling the start of a perfectly staged performance. Lila was radiant, the lights reflecting off the wet shimmer in her eyes, beautiful but fragile. Each time her gaze met Damien's, a new wrinkle carved itself between my brows, an invisible wound. To me, it was all a stage. The congratulations spoken like scripted lines, every smile landing right where the camera could see it. I sat at my table with a glass of water, sweating cold circles onto the wood, the only sober element amid a sea of intoxicated celebration. Damien avoided my eyes not out of fear, but because he was waiting for the right camera angle. I reminded myself, a suit can change in a minute, but character? Rarely in a lifetime. Yet my heart still felt like stone after the confrontation that morning. Then came the signal, the clinking of silverware and glasses, delicate as a starting pistol. The music paused for a beat. Damien rose, microphone in hand. His fingers didn't tremble, only the cord pulled taut like a noose. I just want to say a few words, he began, his voice smooth and polished. He praised Lila, sweet enough to stick, glossy enough to dazzle, the light of my life, the best part of me. Guests sighed with satisfaction. Lila dabbed her tears, and my stomach tightened. He lifted her to the clouds only to throw me off them right after. Damien shifted his gaze. And I want to thank my wonderful father-in-law, Arthur. The lights and cameras locked on me, no escape. A man who built an entire legacy with his own hands. He pronounced the word legacy like a claim of ownership. He paused, his breath audible through the microphone, sharp as pins. Then came the blade. Tonight, to show his trust in the next generation as the greatest wedding gift to his only daughter Arthur, will be handing us the keys to Hearthwind Orchard so that we can lead it into a new era of prosperity. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Over 100 faces turned toward me, not looking, but assessing me like a deal on the table. Applause thundered down like rain, loud, but ice cold. They saw a noble act of inheritance. I saw a gun pressed to my temple, disguised in honeyed words. I looked at Lila. Her pupils were wide with hope, tears sparkling. In that moment, she believed. She believed his story of generosity, and that was the cruelest part. She didn't realize she was applauding her own father's execution. I froze amid the wave of sound. The clapping subsided, whispers rippled again. The orchestra resumed its rhythm, but the play wasn't over. Damien handed the microphone to the best man and began walking through the crowd toward me. A photographer, sensing a special moment, followed closely, his lens circling like a vulture. Damien leaned down, his polite smile fixed, the scent of his cologne stabbing my nose, the scent of freshly printed contracts. "The keys, Arthur," he whispered, his voice slicing through his teeth. Don't make your daughter remember her wedding day because of a scandal you caused. I glanced over his shoulder. Lila was watching, confused but still full of faith. I turned back, met his eyes. "I told you this morning already, Damien," I said softly, my tone dry and heavy with 42 years' weight. "No." The corner of his mouth twitched, the final thread of his mask, snapping loose. His knuckles whitened, veins pulsing in his neck. Violence stirred beneath his skin. "Don't be a sentimental fool," he growled, fingers digging into the chair. "Give them to me. Now." "No." The only word left in me. His face twisted, rage tightening into venom. "Listen, old man," he hissed. "I'm the man of this family now. You'll do as I say. You'll hand me the keys." I shook my head, small but firm. And then it happened. His hand flew faster than lightning. The sharp, dry sound split the hall in two. The chandeliers above seemed to shudder out of sync. The world tilted. The metallic taste flooded my mouth. The music died instantly. In the suffocating silence, a final sound cut through. Click! The flash captured it, sealing forever the image of my humiliation. "Damien, what did you just do?" Lila's scream tore through the hall, her voice cracking on the word, "Dad." Slowly, I rose from my chair. My cheek burned, but I didn't touch it. I didn't look at Damien. I looked at Lila for a long time, pouring every ounce of love and pain into a single gaze. In her eyes, I saw the frightened child she once was, realizing that the man she loved was the wolf in the story. There was no victory in this moment, only loss of a father, of a daughter, and of a dream called family. A drop of blood from my lip fell onto the white tile floor, a lonely red mark, but free. I straightened my collar, not to appear proper, but to reclaim my dignity as a man. Damien stepped closer, his breath heavy behind me like a beast unhinged after its prey dared to fight back. His voice came out low, venomous spikes rising with every word. "Who do you think you are, Arthur? Some kind of apple king? You're the past. I'm the future." I answered quietly, my words sharp as a blade. "A future that begins with violence will end the same way. If you won't give them to me," he hissed through his teeth, "I'll take them, the keys, and your daughter." I shook my head. "No, not out of fear, but because I've seen what you'll do and I won't be part of it." He froze for a second, then let out a hollow laugh. Behind him, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another pulled out a phone. They saw a viral clip, not a human being. I turned and walked away, leaving my son-in-law and a sea of stunned faces amid the wreckage of their perfect day. The crowd parted like the sea before Moses, except here, the divine stayed silent. Each step I took echoed like a hammer striking the coffin of illusion. A few guests raised their hands, almost to applaud, then stopped, afraid the sound would feel like guilt. Petals fell, white against the floor like ashes of belief. The cameras followed me, desperate to capture the final evidence of a father who had lost everything except his self-respect. The path between the silent rows of people felt endless. I passed the lavish flowers, the half-eaten wedding cake, stepping over the red carpet once meant for the victor, now stained with the dust of my shoes. I wasn't leaving a dinner table. I was leaving everything that had ever been called home. The night wind struck my face, cold, but real. For the first time that evening, I could breathe. Beyond the doors was darkness, and I knew, once I crossed it, I would never be the same again. No one could take Eliza's legacy, not unless I allowed them to touch my soul. Tonight I would not allow it. The night road wound like a black ribbon around my neck, embracing each familiar bend. The pain on my cheek matched my heartbeat, a tick that cocked and counted down to what I was about to do. My breath steamed thinly inside the cabin. The shock had worn off. What remained was a cold, heavy thing inside. Purpose. The porch light shone like an eye that would not close, watching me return when there was no longer a home to come back to. I glimpsed Eliza in memory, a warm cup of tea, steam rising, then let it dissipate into the air, slamming the brakes on recollection and steering me back. The tires chewed gravel like lies being ground to dust. I parked by the cider mill and unlocked the heavy wooden door. The air was cool, oak-scented, with cider yeast and damp earth wrapping around me, the smell of a sanctuary where vows must be true. The desk lamp cast a thin slice of light through the dark, like an operating table for truth. The old chair creaked, a soft groan that sounded like Eliza saying, "Stand up straight." I dialed without looking. The numbers had come to live under my skin. The phone rang twice. Adrian. Then I told him the speech, the demand for the keys before everyone, my refusal, the slap. My voice was steady, like reporting a broken irrigation pipe. On the other end, I pictured Adrian sitting up, running his hand through his salt and pepper hair, his mind clicking the pieces into place. When I finished, his tone changed, cold, concise, like a lawyer dropping a wooden gavel. "Listen carefully, Arthur. Lock the door. Don't open it. Wait until 7. Understood." "And Arthur," his voice dropped, "open the box. It's time." A switch flipped. The night changed color. I rose and went to the old box beneath the desk. The keys' click and hinges' creak sounded. I opened it to reveal neatly organized documents. On top of the land deed certificate sat a small, plain wooden box, unvarnished, no lock. The apple wood was smooth, the scent of old rain lifting into my hands. I placed it in the circle of light like setting down a relic. The lid came off. No dried flowers, no brittle papers. The first thing inside was a small black leather notebook. Inside were Eliza's handwriting, graceful, precise. Not a diary, a ledger. Column date, column reason, column amount, signature, $6,000 the 7th of December 2023, deposit for their apartment, $12,000 the 5th of June 2024, emergency car repair, fire null for dental, UDA null for miscalculated taxes. Each figure was a small knife that Eliza had borne in silence. On the last page, a red circle was drawn twice around the total $83,000, the noose on the paper. 83,000, a debt of mercy repaid with a slap. Beneath the ledger lay a dark USB drive. I opened my laptop. One folder only, DC Financials. DC, Damien Cross, the initials staring back. Inside were spreadsheets, statements, invoices, losses, overdue evaporations, ballooning debts, a mountain of despair that made $83,000 look like pocket change. I wondered how Eliza had managed, then found a folded note. All loans to be subject to financial review. She made him sign for every dollar taken from us, and by doing so, she had the right to see the truth. She knew. She had known for a long time. Next, a thick manila envelope sealed with deep red wax, the same wax she used for Christmas cards. A typed cover read, "Partnership Agreement and Right of First Refusal, Alder and Sato Group." The name fell into the night like a weight, making the table tremble very slightly. Alder and Sato, the friend I had once mortgaged land to help start more than a decade ago. We hadn't been in touch for years, but I had not forgotten his quiet integrity. Why was he in this now? At the bottom of the box, in a soft felt lining, sat a tiny digital voice recorder the size of a thumbnail. I pressed play. A faint hiss. Damien's voice, sweetened and smelling of liquor. "Eliza, be reasonable. Unlock the asset value. Arthur is a good farmer, but too sentimental to see the bigger picture." Then Eliza answered, "The big picture is what you see from the porch, not on a bank ledger. This apple farm is not an asset, it is our home. The answer is no, and do not ever speak of this behind my husband's back again." I turned the recorder off and leaned back in the chair. 4 items lay in the circle of light, like a battle plan. Debts, the ledger recording each loan he'd taken and every time we trusted. DEBT evidence, the USB exposing the full shattered finances. Claim, the contract envelope and right of first refusal with Alder and Sato. The truth, the recording, nailing his nature and Eliza's iron will. This was not a keepsake box. This was an evidence box. A magazine of bullets. Eliza did more than tend the orchard. The dawn sliced the early mist with a golden blade. From the end of the gravel road, 2 beams of headlights cut straight through the haze like ambulances for the soul. Adrian Park arrived, one hand clutching a stack of documents, the other a thermos of coffee. His tie was off by exactly half a centimeter, the only sign he had hurried for me. Without knocking, he stepped in, looked at the bruise on my cheek, and nodded ever so slightly in place of, "I understand." I turned the desk lamp, carving a round circle of light across the table. 4 artifacts lay at the 4 points of the compass. Adrian poured coffee without asking, the ritual of 2 old soldiers before a legal operation. He flipped through the little black ledger. His voice dropped a register, lips pressed as if a judge recording a pattern of financial abuse. $83,000, a pattern of dependency and manipulation, dirty but not illegal, yet. He plugged in the USB and his expression froze as the files scrolled. This one is different. The motive is clear, greedy fingerprints everywhere. He needs the orchard to shore up a whole castle built of paper. The recorder clicked on. When the tape finished, Adrian spoke, short and like an order. Act deliberate, intent clear, character exposed. I handed him the red wax envelope. Adrian read. 3 beats showed across his face. Brow, furrow, eyes widen. He leaned back. A soft whistle, the sound of respect. Good God, Arthur. Eliza didn't write a will, she built architecture. He flipped the file. Eliza's firm signature, strong, beside Haruto Sato, Adrian explained, his voice gathering force. A few years back, Alder and Sato Group quietly bought up land. Not commercial zones, green rings, embracing working farms, ecotourism, sustainability, with Hearthwind orchard at the center. And here the clause. Right of first refusal. His finger tapped the clause. Self-destruct code. Any transfer to a non-Hale without written approval of the Alder and Sato board automatically triggers a compulsory sale to Alder and Sato at the predetermined price. If you'd signed yesterday, Damien would have merely been the stupid delivery man for a deal he never understood. Goosebumps rose along my arm, not from fear, but from being saved. Adrian tilted his head, smiling wryly. Eliza buried mines in blue ink. He's been swinging his golf club across a legal minefield. I looked again at the 4 artifacts. I labeled each one, short and clear, like drafting a battle map. DEBT, the ledger recording each loan he took and every time we trusted. Motive, the USB exposing losses, arrears, and ballooning liabilities. Claim, the Alder and Sato contract, ROFR plus poison pill, binding the would-be usurper. Character, the recording, nailing his nature and Eliza's iron will. Adrian leaned his elbow on the table. 3 attack axes, civil contract money tracing. Pick the order you want him to learn his lesson in pain. I touched Eliza's firm signature. It did not tremble. The trembling was in my chest, and it had just stopped. Not suing for anger, suing to teach. Adrian nodded. Her plan needs an executor. Too bad for Damien, you're still here. We snapped into action like hammers striking. Activate. I call Alder and Sato. And notarize. Today. I added. Arrange the meeting. Adrian. 8:30. I opened the line. The green pool of light on the desk shifted to gold as the sun poured in and reclaimed the room. Sunlight skimmed the edge of the file, gleaming on Eliza's name like the sun signing the verdict. Outside, the orchard hills woke. Inside, the plan to awaken had begun. The anger in me had stopped boiling, but it had not died. It had solidified into steel. Dawn did not bring light. It brought an indictment in cold gold laid across the orchard hills. Adrian Park spent the first hour making calls, his voice low but each word falling like a hammer on the bench. He rang legal contacts, verified the effectiveness of the agreement, checked land records. Each dial sounded as if he were calling Eliza's spirit. No signature off, no stray period. Eliza had written the law by instinct. Everything was airtight. Finally, Adrian looked up from the pile of papers, face grave. All clear, Arthur. The agreement is effective, fully binding. They can't touch the orchard. Now we wait for his next move. No, I said. My voice was low and decisive, the voice of a man who had lost everything and was no longer afraid to lose more. We aren't waiting. Eliza waited. I waited. Enough. She left us a weapon. I want to use it. I want him to know who holds control. Adrian studied me for a few seconds, seeing that the man before him was no longer just a farmer. He nodded slowly and gave a thin smile. What do you intend to do? Call Alder and Sato. Tell them about the agreement. Notify them of a third party attempting an unlawful takeover of a core asset in the project. No threats, just the facts. Then watch how the dominoes fall. Adrian picked up the phone. 3 rings, 1 click, no preamble. This is Adrian Park, on behalf of Arthur Hale, owner of Hearthwind Orchard. We reaffirm our commitment to the executed agreement. We also notify you of a hostile attempt to seize this asset by Damien Cross. We want to ensure all stakeholders are informed of potential instability. Thank you. He set the phone down. No shouting, no threats. Just let the truth go out, then let it do its work. A small tremor, but in the financial world, truth spreads faster than any virus. Half a world away, in a paradise where white sand did not yet know it was about to witness an invisible execution, Damien sat on a wicker chair in a white shirt, his smile still perfect, a statue pretty enough to mask the rot within. Lila sat beside him, her face still salted with tears that hadn't dried, clinging to the man who had shattered the person she loved most. You overreacted, Lila, he would say. The wedding, the business, the deal. Losing control isn't a crime, right? The man you married is right here, in paradise. He blamed the champagne, exhaustion, everything except the darkness inside him. Just as Lila might begin to want to believe again, to rebuild the golden cage. Ping, a small sound. He glanced at his phone, annoyed. Then his face froze. The golden sunlight on his skin turned metallic, cold, sharp, merciless. The email subject bloomed like a verdict. Urgent. Helios Ridge Development Project funding suspension. The principal partner, 90% of funding pulled out immediately, citing instability around key local assets. Funding frozen at once. His eyes raced down line after line, each one burying another layer of earth over his dream. Ping. A second email from the Alder and Sato board, the very board where he was heavily indebted from another venture. Emergency board meeting convened. Attendance required at the Chicago office within 48 hours to explain breaches of fiduciary duty and material financial risk. The first email closed the coffin, the second hammered in the final nail. The sky above Hawaii remained blue, but in his eyes it shattered into shards. What's wrong, Damien? Lila asked, seeing his color change. I have to go, he stammered to his feet. Back to Chicago. Now. Paradise has turned into a prison. He scrambled to pack, canceled everything, a boat ride to the mainland, a long flight in tense silence. He thought he could escape consequences in a tropical heaven, but Eliza's hand reached farther than he imagined. Back at the silent cider mill, where you could hear a clock's second hand pierce the air, Adrian and I poured more coffee. We didn't yet have all the details, only the knowledge that the trap had closed. Adrian shrugged, calm. We don't need to do anything else, Arthur. Just pour coffee and watch the waves hit the shore. I looked out the window. The old apple rose yellowing in the Sunday. Eliza was still working just from the other side now. That hand lived in every signature, every clause, every chiming email. Once she sowed apples. Today she harvested justice. The first domino had fallen. The wolf was running back to his den, straight into our hands. 2 days later, this flight carried more than just my body to Chicago. It carried a farmer into the clouds, into the realm of men who believed they owned the world. The steady hum of the engines sounded like a metallic heartbeat. Cold, mechanical, emotionless, but steady, just like Eliza's plan. I placed my calloused hand on the soft leather armrest of the business-class seat, the border where 2 worlds touched. The city rose beneath me like a glass beast awakening. I wasn't afraid of it. I came to show it who truly held control. The elevator shot upward like an arrow, each passing floor thinning the air as though oxygen here was reserved only for the wealthy. The halls of Alder and Sato bore no paintings, no glowing logos. True power needs no decoration. It silences through simplicity. The marble floor was as cold as a frozen river. Each step echoed with the ghosts of those who fell to greed. The dark wood carried the scent that reminded me of the apple wood where Eliza planted her first trees, the same material, two different worlds. The glass wall framed the loop, a tangled web of veins in a massive living body, but I knew this. All veins are fed by the soil, and the soil was on my side. The conference room was long and minimalist. The black granite table gleamed like a headstone. Before the window stood Haruto Sato, hands clasped behind his back, the posture of a man who had seen the world collapse, yet never lost his honor. He turned. It wasn't just a handshake, it was the silent reunion of two men who had once written the same chapter of life. His eyes lingered on the bruise on my cheek, wordless. Some wounds don't need to be explained, they speak for themselves. He set down his teacup and said slowly, "Arthur, there are promises that don't need signatures because they're carved in dignity." We sat side by side at the head of the table, a united front. The room was so still that the ticking of the second hand could be heard clearly. Every second was a footstep of destiny drawing closer. The door opened. What entered wasn't a man, it was the corpse of a dream. Damien stumbled in, his expensive suit wrinkled, his tie hanging like a noose. Among the black granite and glass, he looked like a stain on a mirror. His shoes struck the floor in the rhythm of a man being tried. He looked up and saw Haruto Sato at the head of the table, and the practiced half-smile fell from his face like a mask cracking apart. Then his eyes met mine. For one heartbeat, the room drained of air. He looked at me, the farmer he had once slapped in humiliation, now sitting at the table of power, calmly sipping tea. His face went pale, every drop of blood drained away. His lips moved as if to form an apology, but his throat was filled with ash. The light from the window fell across his forehead. Sweat glistened like streaks of blood beneath the sunday. Haruto set his teacup down with the gentlest motion, the signal to begin a silent trial. I felt no anger anymore. Only peace like the earth after a storm. Bare, but real. Haruto spoke, his voice deep and steady like the slope of the orchard hill on a windy day. When a man strikes the earth remembers, and today it has come to collect. At that moment, Damien Cross could no longer tell which fall hurt more, the one from the clouds, or the one from the illusion that he had ever stood above anyone else. The image of me sitting in his world had shattered the reality he clung to. He opened his mouth and closed it. The sound was only a dry tongue scraping the roof of his mouth. Finally, fragmented words fell out. Why did you, Haruto? Arthur. What is this? He looked from Haruto Sato's stone-cold face to my calm eyes, desperately searching for some mistake. He looked like a cornered animal, realizing the iron cage was closing. Mr. Sato did not answer. He did not even look at him. He only set down his teacup, the sound thin as a blade cutting the air. Then he gave a very small tilt of the head toward Adrian Park, a motion almost rude, but meaningful. You are not important enough for me to speak to. From now on, deal with my lawyer. Adrian stood. He moved slowly, deliberately, the storm's eye moving into focus. The briefcase opened. He did not pull out a thick stack of files. Instead, he laid each item from Eliza's box on the table in the shape of a cross. Ledger, USB recording contract. Mr. Cross, Adrian's voice was clear and flat. We will begin with the speaking numbers, then speak about the man. He opened the small black ledger. Each page turned with a rustle sharp as a knife. The record compiled by Eliza Hale, listing the personal loans you received over 3 years. Total $83,000 unpaid. The corner of Damien's mouth twitched, an out-of-sync smile on his cheek. He could hardly believe it himself. Family matters, misunderstandings, gifts. Adrian did not answer. He plugged the black USB into the port. The large screen behind Mr. Sato flared to life. No slides, just raw figures, truth refusing to be made up. Red lines, negative balances, debt charts. A laser pointer landed on one number. Margin call. 3 days, a margin call, a desperate debtor. This is the motive you were eyeing the orchard for. A drop of sweat crawled along Damien's temple like the second hand marking the hour of judgment. He stammered about market volatility. Adrian switched to the recorder. Numbers talk about debt. The voice speaks to character. He hit play. Damien's voice rang out, smooth and disdainful. Eliza, be reasonable. Unlock the asset value. Arthur is a good farmer, but too sentimental to see the big picture. Then Eliza answered, the big picture is what decent people see from the porch. Spreadsheets are where the greedy price a soul. This apple farm is not an asset, it is our home. No. The playback stopped with a pop. Silence thickened, as if someone had drained the room of oxygen. Damien shrank, his face blotched red. He dared not look at anyone. Adrian let the silence extend, then closed with, manipulation is dirty, but not yet criminal. This is a crime. The screen changed. Partnership agreement registered in the county between Eliza Hale and Alder and Sato Group. A legally binding contract from 6 years ago. Any action you take to seize control of the orchard constitutes intentional interference with an existing economic contract. Criminal offense. Any action. Only then did Haruto Sato speak. His voice was not loud, but it filled the air. For the first time, he looked directly at Damien. Do you know why Eliza Hale came to see me? He shook his head. Many years ago, Mr. Sato looked past me and then back at him. My company was only an idea with a poor budget. Banks refused. One couple did not. They signed guarantees, putting 12 acres of their land as collateral to help me. That couple was Samuel Vance and Eliza. The room fell into utter silence, a truth so deep no more words were needed. Damien gaped, stunned. At last he understood. This was not a meeting. This was a trial. The law judging the crime, memory judging the man. Eliza did not come to set traps, Mr. Sato continued, voice righteously angry. She came to protect a friend. This agreement was not for profit. It is a vow between two people who understood loyalty. He stood a calm symbol of authority. You reached into the legacy of a woman I respect, and you struck the man I owe. Freeze the buyback. Seize the debts. Terminate the contract. Forward the files to criminal prosecution. Damien let out a strangled sound. He did not fall, the chair fell for him. No more arrogance, no more resistance, only a withered body in collapse. He understood. He was not challenging an old farmer. He had knocked against a silent giant named loyalty. I placed my hand on the cold stone table, thinking of the warm earth at home, the orchard Eliza planted with her hands and with dignity. She had bridged the soil to the clouds with her signature. After the final thunder faded, only the scent of damp soil and the apple trees bowed under the morning sun remained. This silence wasn't peace, it was the echo of a battle. The ground still bore the footprints of the storm, but from those scars, new buds were rising. When justice is done, there is no celebration, only a heart that needs stitching back together. In the city, Adrian Park spoke more slowly now, his tone lower. He was no longer the fierce lawyer, but the man cleaning up the wreckage of a soul. He untangled each legal knot, dismantling Damien's life carefully, irreversibly. I didn't ask for details. The darkness had left this land that was enough. I returned to the rhythm of the earth. The spring wind carried the scent of young leaves, warm soil, the smell of beginnings. I stood in the west field, bending young apple branches as though teaching children to stand upright, while the other hand cleared weeds that threatened the life returning. To tend a garden is to tend memory. You must kneel, get your hands dirty, and then the soil will breathe again. Every afternoon, I still looked toward the road leading into the orchard, not because I was waiting for anyone, but because my heart whispered that something was about to bloom. About 2 weeks after the meeting in Chicago, a car slowly turned onto the dirt path. The tires crushed memories, halting with a tremor like a child afraid of being scolded. Lila stepped out. The proud, elegant figure she once carried was now only a fragile outline, trembling inside fabric too fine for real life. The eyes that once gleamed with dreams had turned into 2 dull ponds where faith had drowned. There was no wind, no birds, only the sound of city shoes sinking into soft earth, each step a confession. She stopped a few paces away, both hands twisting the straps of her bag. "Dad," she called, so softly the wind couldn't carry it, but I heard it, because my heart had never stopped waiting for that word. I stood still, neither forward nor back. The hands that once held a shovel didn't know what to do with my own daughter. Her face broke open. Tears burst out like someone had opened a valve after years of rust. She stumbled forward. I stepped toward her, and we met in an embrace. She trembled violently in my arms, and for the first time in years, I heard her heartbeat close to mine, weak, but real. The faint scent of her perfume was the same one Eliza used to wear. I closed my eyes. For a moment, both women stood together inside me. "I was blind," she sobbed. "I'm sorry, Dad. I betrayed Mom. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say it's all right. Forgiveness isn't a word, it's an act." I only held her tighter, as if keeping the part of Eliza the wind hadn't carried away. Time stopped. Even the sunlight hesitated to fall on this moment. When her sobs began to fade, I wiped the tears from her cheek. I removed my muddy gloves as if taking off the past and went into the shed by the edge of the orchard. When I came back, I carried a clean pair of gloves. Small size, they once belonged to Eliza. Now they fit Lila's hands. I offered them. She looked at them, lips trembling. "The earth always forgives, Lila," I said softly. "The soil never asks about the seed's past. It keeps no record of droughts or frosts. It only asks, what are you willing to plant today?" She lifted the gloves, her fingers tracing the soft leather. The sunlight shimmered on their surface like tears on her cheeks. "You can't erase the old seasons," I continued, "but you can plant a new one, and the earth, it always listens." "Let's begin again," I said simply, firmly. "Right here, together." When she slipped on the gloves, I handed her a small spade. The soft scrape of metal against soil echoed the first sound of the season of forgiveness. We knelt between two rows of young apple trees. She looked at me. I nodded, and together we began clearing the weeds. The tender leaves swayed in the wind like children learning to breathe. Each weed pulled out was another stitch, closing the tear between father and daughter. Life returned to the field. At the edge of the orchard, a pair of gloves passed from mother to daughter, a silent inheritance. I looked down the road where the storm had once passed, then turned back to the garden where a new season was growing. Inside me, an empty space filled with the smallest sound, the earth breathing, and somewhere among the rows of apple trees, I knew Eliza was smiling, in a place where every mistake can bloom. The years passed like a lifetime contained in a single breath, long, heavy, and finally released. Autumn returned to the hills of Asheville not with brilliance and noise, but with quiet maturity, like the heart of someone who had lived through both collapse and rebirth. The golden light draped across the slopes like the shawl Eliza once wore. Nature seemed to dress itself again in memory. After the storm, the world had grown quieter. Even the wind moved softly, afraid to touch wounds still healing. On the orchard, every sound was no longer work, it was the breath of life itself. The first thing one saw upon turning in was the new sign. Applewood, cut from a tree that had fallen during the storm, Eliza, still giving her body to the land. The grain that had witnessed the wind now became the witness of endurance. The letters carved into time read, "The Eliza and Arthur Hale Foundation, for Sustainable Agriculture, in partnership with Alder and Sato Group." The craftsman had said, "This wood is as hard as stone." I only smiled. Things built from love are always hardest to cut. The sign didn't just stand at the gate, it stood as a boundary restored between past and future. That future was walking among the apple rows. I stood near the cider house, watching Lila. She no longer sought a place on the polished floors of skyscrapers. She stood instead in the black soil of her home. Today, Lila was guiding a group of agricultural students, teaching them how to test the sugar content of the apples before pressing. The hands that once held a phone now lifted a young branch. The fingers that once trembled from fear of loss now trembled from emotion. Jeans and sturdy boots had replaced high heels, only the soil could make her stand firm. I watched from afar, not calling her name, afraid a single word might break the image of Lila becoming herself again. Her eyes were clear as dew, holding both faith and redemption. And my daughter, she was beautiful. That afternoon, Haruto Sato's black car rolled into the yard again, now a familiar sight. He came not for business, but for friendship. Two old men walked among the apple trees, two survivors of a war beneath a sunset, red as blood flowing through the veins of the earth. We spoke not of contracts or money, but of weather, harvests, and the small simplicities that make a life. I once thought power lived on the highest floors, Haruto said quietly. Turns out, it lives in those who can bow to the earth. We stopped at the top of the hill overlooking the lake, the place where Eliza and I had carved our initials into wood. I brought 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of freshly fermented apple wine, the first batch Lila had overseen entirely. As the liquid poured, the sound was thin and soft, like Eliza's voice returning through the air. The aroma of ripe apples, oak, and autumn wind intertwined. Haruto raised his glass, the red glow catching sunlight on the rim of the crystal, and looked at me with quiet respect. To Eliza, I raised my glass. The chime of crystal against crystal rang like a small bell announcing a new chapter, no winners, only growth. I looked down at the orchard Lila, lifting her head to smile at the students. The light on her hair, like Eliza herself, was shining through her. My legacy was not the sign nor the partnership. It lived in my daughter, in a life rebuilt stronger and more truthful than ever before. To all that endures, I said. The cider was perfect, the taste of sun, of soil, of promises kept. Order had returned to my world not through revenge, but through respect. Not by breaking the wrong, but by building the right. Standing beside a friend, watching my daughter find her way home, I knew this foundation would endure for generations. Some leave behind wealth, some leave behind names. Eliza left direction, and I realized true justice does not need applause. It needs continuation. Years ago, Eliza said the earth would care for those who cared for it. Now I could see it clearly, the earth was keeping its word. Legacy does not lie in what we build, but in how we allow others to keep building. And you, when your season passes, what will remain? A structure or a promise? If this story touched your heart, please click like to support those who still believe that honesty and love can heal every wound. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories where justice is rewritten through kindness and where true legacy isn't measured by wealth, but by the values we leave in the hearts of others. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what do you believe is the most precious legacy a person can leave behind? I'd truly love to hear your answer.